Hey everybody, I just thought I would make a quick follow-up to my the reason why Göbekli Tepe was buried video from a few days ago. There was a great response on that, and that video is still being watched like 1,500 times an hour, so that is pretty overwhelming, and I don't even have a chance to keep up with all the comments. I think there's been over 450 comments, and some people say, hey, you haven't gotten back to me, you haven't checked out the video. I was gone all day yesterday, I didn't have my earphones, and pardon me if I can't go through hundreds of comments to find the video you sent me. And people seem to say, I think I had some new viewers on that video, people who aren't subscribed to me. So let's just talk a little bit about me. I do a lot of my videos by request. I was asked why Göbekli Tepe was buried, and I stated that some of the evidence, and that's all I did. I wasn't making a video, hey, this is exactly why. I don't care about being right. I just want to put out videos based on the best evidence without any agenda or bias, and that is what my subscribers expect from me. But let's go a little bit more into this impact, possibly around 7900 BC, and these people living underground. Now, a lot of you, I think, don't know a lot about Göbekli Tepe or has looked into it and the dating and the burial. But this is Göbekli Tepe's area right here. I think this is Göbekli Tepe right here. It's about almost 3,000 feet in elevation, and it sits in the northern part of this plain of Haran, I think it is referred to. But was this 10,000 years ago a huge ancient body of water? Well, that's a possibility. Another thing I want to mention, this is ancient Haran, one of the most ancient places on Earth, or at least that we have remains coming from this area. And this area is between the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates. Some texts call that the birthplace of humanity. But this is a very ancient part of the world. Göbekli Tepe, ancient Haran. Karahan Tepe, I don't think some of my new viewers are aware that there's a hill just like Göbekli Tepe with T-shaped pillars sticking out of above the ground that hasn't even been touched. Karahan Tepe, we have ancient Sagmatar. And you can find videos about all these places in my Ancient Turkey playlist. Now let's talk a little bit more about 7900 BC and a global cataclysm, because that's kind of what myths reflect. Something bad happened to the whole world. Well, I went over the evidence. Something bad happened, and it seemed to be something coming from the heavens, an impact event. Based on what the Egyptians tell us, there was a hail of burning stones. That doesn't sound like a CME or anything like that. And people have left comments about the thunderbolts and the electric universe, and I like their work. It's just not that I am acquainted with it so much. I am familiar with it, but I haven't researched it and tied it into all the other research I've done. I can only research so much at one time. But those people who are leaving me messages about the thunderbolts, those are good messages, and I know all about them. And I don't dismiss anything they say. And I think sometimes we have to combine the evidence, the commentary evidence and evidence from other places, to truly wrap our heads around what happened at this time, because there is a lot of questions that we have no answers for that need explanation. Now I'm going to read from a few different websites, and if some of this is repeated information, well, so be it. But this is what the evidence I have found. It says laboratory work on the effects of impacts, and this is around 7640 BC with windows of a couple centuries on each side. So when you look at all these windows, I think you have to tie it into a single event that happened very late, 70 or 7000 BCs. But it says these tidal waves of more than 5 kilometers high and traveling up to 640 kilometers per hour can be caused. Waves of this size would run over much of the Earth's land areas. We have dry salt lakes out in California, Western Nevada. The debris forced into the upper atmosphere by impact would cause a short-term nuclear winter and a longer-term global warming effect. It would also leave traces of nitric acid, and that's been found in ice cores, magnetic fingerprints, tektite trails, and radiocarbon blips, which could be used to date the event. This type of evidence shows that there have been 2 large impacts in the last 10,000 years. A sevenfold impact into all the world's major oceans around 7640 BC and a single impact into the Mediterranean about 3150 BC. And that's according to Uriel's machine, and other evidence has pretty much backed that up from what I have found. Now, we have evidence that low-lying depressions, like craters, were filled up by water at this time period, and Randall Carlson has gone over that. But impacts into the oceans and a massive rainout over time would account for those. Reading over environmental impacts, and this is just kind of a general website, but it reflects on what other people have found. 8000 BC, or right around that time period, the world, inland flooding due to catastrophic glacier melt, takes place in several regions. This was a worldwide event, it seems like, to me. Now, I have talked about Lake Agassiz before, and this was a huge lake, and this is a look at Lake Agassiz. It was almost as big as Hudson Bay, or bigger than the Great Lakes, and this seemed to fill up and was drained over periods of times. And when there was catastrophic flooding in the Red River between North Dakota and Minnesota, maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I remember news reports. It was refilling ancient Lake Agassiz, and that's when I really first heard about this. But when did this fill up to its maximum? Well, on these timelines of environmental history, it says Lake Agassiz refills from glacier melt around 7900 BC as glaciers retreat north. Really, 7900 BC. So on the other side of the world, when the Egyptians were reporting this catastrophe and other things were going on around the world, this is when Lake Agassiz refilled. This was a global event. In this book from North Dakota History, it says Lake Agassiz reached its maximum coverage in about 7900 BC. There was a massive impact, maybe a rainout, maybe melting of the ice caps. In 8000 BC is when the ice cap over Wisconsin mysteriously disappears. Now, I made this video 3-4 weeks ago, Catalhoyuk, and pretty amazing ruins, 9,000 years old. Well, if it's my theory that the people buried Göbekli Tepe that were living in the approximate area, and they went to live underground at Derinkuyu, and then is this a place that they built after they lived at Derinkuyu? Well, let's read just a little bit about what they say about Catalhoyuk. I find this highly interesting. Glacial relapse would have brought with it intensely long periods of snow, ice, and freezing conditions, which would have forced indigenous people to seek refuge in cave shelters in an attempt to survive on a day-to-day basis. This was significant for Catalhoyuk's folks' construction of its mostly subsurface shrines and houses, all huddled together without exterior doors or windows, was clear evidence that they have evolved from a race that had once experienced a subterranean lifestyle. Can you say Derinkuyu? Did they live at Derinkuyu and then re-enter the world and build Catalhoyuk? Well, the evidence seems to suggest that. But I thought I would go over just a little more of the evidence. Seems it was a global cataclysm if 7900 BC is exactly when Lake Agassiz filled to its brim. Something bad happened. Did they cover Gobekli Tepe? Well, later cultures seem to indicate that they descended from somebody who was living below ground at Derinkuyu. Now, Derinkuyu is quite a ways away from Gobekli Tepe, so they would have had to migrate away from the place and buried it. So, sometime in the future, maybe somebody would stumble across it and realize that there was people here with tremendous knowledge that were doing remarkable things 10,000 years ago at a place we now call Göbekli Tepe. Is this the place of the Watchers? From the biblical text, well, it seems to fit. What were they watching? They were watching the stars. Hope you thought that was interesting. Thought I'd talk a little bit more on this. There seems to be some interest. You can find a better proposal on why Göbekli Tepe was buried based on real evidence. Leave it in the comment section. Don't be rude. You'll be blocked instantly. Have a nice day.